going on, Rich Relationship Refuge family? As you can tell, I'm Gil from the Rich Relationship without Renee this week. Uh, for all you were here last week, you noticed that Renee was doing a live for the ladies. Renee was doing a live for the ladies, and so we kind of talked about it a little bit, and we said, you know what? If you're gonna do a live for the ladies, I'm going to do a live for the guys. So, Rich Brothers, give you a second to jump on, ladies. If you're here, guess what? You are off this week. You can take a break, but if you want to listen, you're more than welcome to. We're going to kind of give you some answers to the test, but this is really focused and geared towards my brothers. There's a lot of videos I even watch, even when it comes to relationships and other stuff, as we talk about the streaming channels and all that stuff. But there's times where sometimes you just want to talk specifically to the men. And there's once a year you go to, whether you're at a church or you're at a conference or something like that, you may see different events happening that are geared towards guys. But there's a time where I know for myself that I think about things and go through things, and I want to share that with some of my guys out there today. We're going to talk about something that we mentioned on a video, or actually, I think it was a podcast or video. This is a little while back, but it was actually geared towards the gap. Renee has been promoting things. She does an amazing job of doing those things when it comes to promoting the channel, promoting videos and things like that. But we're going to talk specifically today about the gap. And you may say, what is the gap? And if you watch the channel at any length, you know I love acronyms and what they mean. Well, gap is really talking about greed, arrogance, and pride. These are three specific areas that I think affect not just men, but I wanted to gear towards men specifically because for myself, this is an area that I struggle with. So I would say this video is more for me too, than I'm directing it at my brothers out there who may be watching, whether you're watching live now or you're going to be watching later on. Something to think about. You know, we always talk about on the Rich Relationship Refuge about um, doing the self-assessments, always looking at yourself as it geared and directed towards your relationships. So when we think about greed, arrogance, and pride, I have to go back to myself and think about whether it was early in my marriage or early in my relationship with Renee. I would say out of the biggest area of these three, and you ask yourself the same question, which one do you actually, I won't say struggle with, but would be a major obstacle: greed, arrogance, or pride? And I'm going to give a breakdown of the three. We're going to talk a little bit about, I'll give you some points on it, and even how you actually can solve some of the things if you're struggling in one of these areas. And we always try to come from a biblical perspective. And I actually got a couple scriptures that I'll actually give you that actually talks to this specific area. So go back a little bit. When I think about one of the things that I actually like doing is photography. This right here, I got cameras all around here that we are actually shooting live right now. Well, when you're taking a picture, you always have to, turn this ring right here to make sure you get things in focus. When I think about the focus of myself and in light of my relationships, you always want to get the best shot possible. So there's going to be adjustments that you have to make when it comes to your relationships. And greed, arrogance, and pride are three of the areas that for me was something that I had to really focus and target in on. And I'm going to talk to you about mine first. And that was pride. I don't know where you are right now in your relationships, and you may not think about these things in light of that, but I challenge you to think about them in light of how your relationship is going and say, which one of these areas could I do better at or get better at? You may not be struggling with any of them. Well, guess what? That means you need to be made aware that this can be some of the things that actually come into your relationship that actually can affect it. And if you're not aware of it, you may not know why. It can be a source of conflict, it can be a source of discontentment, and it can be a source of constant battles that happen and you not know why. Well, the reason why we're actually talking about it is because these are areas that no one talked to me about it when I was growing up or early in my relationships, and I would struggle, but I know why. Well, when I talk about pride, I think about in my relationship with Renee, This is one area that I used to say I didn't have an issue with. That's usually an indicator that if you think I'm good in this area or you think there's nothing wrong with you, then guess what? That's an indicator in and of itself, like it was with me. And I say that pride because when I actually struggle in pride area, I would always think that there was something else outside of what I was doing or what I was saying that caused me to not have a struggle or not have an issue when it came to my relationship with Renee. If you have a trouble or if you have issues with saying I'm wrong or that never comes to mind, or you think I'm always in a position of knowing the right answer at the right time, then that can be a struggle as well. For me, when I say I had an issue with pride, was as we were growing in our relationship together. I'm gonna focus this camera here 1 second. As we were struggling, as we were going up in our relationship, I would think that there are things that would be happening, and I didn't think that there was anything wrong. But unbeknownst to me, because this was a blind area of my own life, and I thank God for Renee because she was able to help me overcome in this area by bringing certain things to my attention that made me go, maybe that's something that I need to look at. You have to always be looking at the areas of your own life that can be a stumbling block or an obstacle for you. And if you have an indicator of, like I said earlier, of struggles and challenges, well, why is it that it actually happens? If you find yourself pushing people away because you don't want to be vulnerable. For my guys, this is probably an area that I think challenges a lot of men because you don't know what does vulnerability look like. The first thing we think in our society right now is it is a sign of weakness. And I wouldn't say that that's true. If you're joining me now, we're going to be talking about G.A.P. And I thank you guys for hanging out with me. Ladies, by all means, you can hang out with me. I'm by myself this week because Renee had her live last week. So we doing my live this week. So thanks for joining on the Rich Relationship Refuge. By all means, share this with somebody that you know may be going through this or that you think could benefit from it. Like and subscribe and all that stuff on the video. So like I was saying, when you talk about the vulnerability aspect, that was an area that I didn't think that anything was wrong. I found myself being in denial about things that was challenging for me or that I think everything was going great when actually it really wasn't. You know, you don't normally think of I'm prideful. You know, that's one thing that most people think. And I love the way James puts it in James chapter 4. It says, pride cometh before the fall. And what God does is he opposes it. So God opposes the proud, but he also says he gives grace to the humble. That's one of the solutions when it comes to pride, that we'll talk about some of the solutions that you actually can implement and be thoughtful of or mindful of if you're trying to overcome in these areas. So as we dive in, so let's talk a little bit about the first one, which is greed. You know, when you think about greed, this is where an indicator that might be where it's not necessarily always connected to the financial aspect. Most times people think of greed and they think of stuff. They think of finances, they think of cars and tangible things that you can hold on to and you can really get a grip on. If you're hoarding things, that's an indicator, but it's not the one thing that it actually is an indicator of. It's a stumbling block in your own life, or we call it growth areas in your life. Do you find yourself being challenged with intimacy? Now, I'm not necessarily talking about the sexual type of intimacy. I'm talking about intimacy when it comes to just being in connection and having a shared bond with your significant other or your wife. You know, this is an area that we don't think about because it's going to be a damage to your intimacy. Hello, JR. Appreciate you joining. If you actually have an area that you want to think about, intimacy is one of those challenge areas that will be something that you have to be mindful of and look at, because right now I'm actually in San Antonio, JR. I appreciate you. We're actually in our actual office and we're talking about G.A.P, greed, arrogance, and pride as it relates to men and their relationship and some of the things that you can actually do to think about it when it comes to bettering your relationships. So we're talking also about the point that I was making was the damage of your intimacy. If you find that it's something that you have an obstacle of getting closer to your significant other, might be greed. It might be some of those areas that you're holding on to things that are for yourself. You want to keep things away from others. You're hoarding it. You're keeping it away. That's an indicator of selfishness. One of the things that actually happens a lot is you actually have broken trust. When you break away from your trust in your relationship, that you may not think of it as um, a greed type of indicator, but it can be. When you actually are forced to open up, like my shirt actually says, be hot, honest, open, and transparent. That's something that you don't want to give of when it comes to your relationship, because that's an area that you feel that it's just yours and yours alone, and you want to hold on to it and hoard it and keep it to yourself. You have to prioritize. If you find yourself prioritizing work and hobbies and things that you enjoy doing over spending time with your significant other, your family, and your friends, that's one of those things that you have to look at. I'm being greedy with my time. So like I said earlier, it's not necessarily about the the stuff that you're hoarding and keeping away from others. It's actually the thing that can be a stumbling block when it comes to your relationship. But what is the actual, I'm gonna give you some of the solutions that you actually can look at when it comes to greed. It's really just the opposite: generosity. When you are more freely open and giving when it comes to the things that you are holding back from others, by giving of yourself, giving towards others and serving others, that is a definite solution to greed. And it's not going to come natural. We normally want to keep things to ourselves by nature because we think I'm going to be lacking, or I'm not going to have the things that I want because of whatever the issue may be from growing up. You know, I think about, when you think about greed, one thing that actually helped me growing up was, or actually as I got older, was having a sense of purpose. Just like Renee and I do the Rich Relationship Refuge, and we talk to couples all the time. We're serving in the, when you take that and you flip it around and you're actually in a process of serving others, giving, giving out of what you have accumulated, whether it's your time, your talents, your efforts, you're going to find that it's going to pay huge dividends when it comes to your relationships and actually getting better. Anybody that actually has had challenges with keeping things from others and keeping things just to themselves, it's never going to be enough. You're never going to have enough. You're never going to accumulate enough. You're never going to be able to buy enough. You're never going to be able to just give. I know a lot of relationships, we think about it from the greed standpoint of, how is it that I am not giving of myself to others when I feel like I don't have enough time? Us guys, we have work, we have things that we actually have to do, whether it's your honeydew list. Renee does pretty good at not giving me a large honeydew list, but I get one. And you feel like you don't have time to even do things in and of yourself for yourself. Well, when that happens, you start pulling back. You start pulling back and keeping things for yourself, and it becomes a, what I to call, this is a silent taker. You silently take away from things that are actually um, should be shared and given out to others when it comes to your relationships. So, greed is the silent taker. Let's talk a little bit about arrogance. Arrogance is always right. Do you find yourself in a situation where, whether it's a conflict or a disagreement or even a conversation, and you find yourself always having the solution? Nah, that never happens to me, right? If you know me, I'm more of a quiet, reserved person, but guess what? Silently, I'm also passive aggressive. And passive aggressive people tend to think that they're right, even in their own mind and even in their own thing. I know I'm exposing some of the things about myself, but the Bible tells you in Luke chapter 12 to be on guard against it. Be on guard against pride and arrogance and prideful things, because that's one thing that you have to be mindful of. Arrogance, it says, I'm going to dismiss the thoughts and the information from others. You think you're the smartest person in the room, whether it's a particular subject matter, a particular topic, or anything like that. You dismiss other people and dismiss others when they have a differences of opinion from your own. That can be challenging in and of itself, which usually leads to conflict. You are one of those types of persons that think, when it comes to, if you ever heard a person says, I'm not arrogant, I'm just confident. Yeah, that's an indicator of arrogance. Arrogance is the opposite of what you should be displaying. A person who's arrogant isn't humble about anything. Humility is the solution to arrogance. What does humility actually look like? When you are actually humble before not only God, but to others in your relationships, you're going to be looking to do what's best for them. You're going to put them first. You're going to put them ahead of everything in every situation that you do. As far as it's almost, well, not almost, but it is the polar opposite of greed. When you have greed inside of you, that is going to be the opposite of humility, which leads to the arrogant side of things coming up and coming out in your relationships. Have you had those situations where you think this is something I need to be right more than actually getting it right when it comes to the whether it's a disagreement or something that you have a discussion about or you want to discuss with your significant other, and you find yourself struggling with coming up with the right things to say, or you may be the type that actually always have something to say, have an excuse, having a reason, having justification for what you said, why you said it, how you said it, or even being right in every situation. Nobody's going to be right in every situation, but you feel that there's a need that you have to exercise over others to get to the point to where you want to know that this is something that I have a desire to confess or come across or even give. You have to actually cultivate your generosity. That's actually the opposite of when it comes to the arrogance. when 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 you are actually cultivating wanting to be humble before others, it's going to be something that if it feels a challenge to you at the very beginning, but when you have a time and you focus your attention on others, it's going to play huge dividends when it comes to, we always call it the right trap. You have to constantly be right. Do you dismiss advice? Do you dismiss advice when it comes to situations and circumstances that others have input in or should have input in, and you ignore it because you feel like there's a better way, or you actually look for a better way just so you can be the right in the every situation? You may see others as competition rather than on the same team. And especially when it comes to your relationship, this is not something that should be a element in your relationship where you see your significant other or your spouse as an adversary. When you have those thoughts and those intentions that actually come to pass, that's probably a sign of arrogance that you have to take a look at and say, why am I this way? Why is it that the things that I want to achieve, it's almost like self-sabotage? When you have that sense of entitlement or that sense of wanting to be right instead of getting it right because you find yourself not listening to others, well, that's a sign that when it comes to arrogance, it can lead to those conflicted and strains in your relationship. Are you constantly in conflict because you feel that the other people or the other persons are the source of what's going on? When it comes to conflict, it's always them, it's always others in that situation. I have an ideal of when it comes to arrogance, that what it actually looks like in a daily actual endeavor. When you are arrogant, nobody likes to even claim it or even think of themselves as an arrogant person. This is one of those challenges that actually it goes contrary to humility. Are you humble enough to say, this is an area that I struggle with? This is an area that I want to bring value to others when it comes to how I am. I want to change and I have a desire to change. Somebody who has a hold on arrogance won't think that there's anything wrong with them when it comes to changes that need to be made. They're going to always have a reason or justification or solution to whatever the issue or obligation or obstacle may be in their relationship. Let's talk about pride. Pride is what we call the wall builder. Pride kind of looks very similar to arrogance. And this is one of those areas that you say, you know what? I was wrong. Have you ever heard somebody say that? If you never heard them utter those words, guess what? Pride is probably a very big indicator that operates in their life. I was one that actually had that become in my, it wasn't even a part of my vocabularies. It was something that I actually had to come to grips with and had to say, you know what? When it comes to pride, when I read that in James chapter 4, God opposes the proud, but he gives grace to the humble. I didn't want to be in that situation where I thought of myself as being prideful, or I actually looked at myself as a prideful person. When you actually have those things come to play or you start thinking about, you're going to avoid some of the conversation that actually comes out, or you're not going to even address, or you're not going to even want to deal with, because we know what our shortcomings are. When you have those times and attentions to where I want to bring something up to you, but I don't really know how to broach it, or somebody brings something up to you that's a challenge for you, you're going to avoid the conversation altogether, because it's going to require a level of vulnerability to be able to discuss it and to be able to talk about it, and to be able to even see yourself as having a deficiency in an area or a growth area in your life, or who you are as a person. We always tell, we told the girls even as they were growing up, conflict is not bad until it turns personal. You're going to always be in conflict. Sometimes it's going to be internal conflict with yourself, but it doesn't have to be that way. But the only obstacle to overcome, or how you overcome that obstacle, is to allow other people to speak into your lives. Whether it's somebody you know indirectly that you have one-on-one contact with on a regular and daily basis, they're going to be honest with you about things that you need to work on. If you don't have that in your life, send us an email, send us a text or anything through the Rich Relationship Refuge, and we'll be there. We'll be there to actually be there to talk about you. I think I see somebody joined in Port Chop Black. I don't know if that's a hand saying hi or just a question, but if you got something in the chat, put it in there. If you're joining me now, we're talking about G.A.P, greed, arrogance, and pride that actually comes to play in the relationships. And these are all three things that actually can be very quiet, that is happening in the background of your relationships, that can be things that are having an impact and you not even be aware of it, because it is, again, it's one of those silent things and quiet things that is actually happening, and that you've been operating in for years that you may not even be aware of. These are the areas that when you think about it, nobody wants to say, I'm greedy, I'm arrogant, and I'm prideful. But it all is going to affect us as humans, because we were born that way. We were born into sin with a sinful nature. And these are all three elements that actually are there, that are present, that you didn't actually ask for, but they just showed up because of our sinful nature. Well, when we talk about it from another aspect, do you find yourself that you hold grudges? Grudges is one of those areas that I think I was like that, because I was passive aggressive. Like I said earlier, I'm passive aggressive to where the point where I want to keep things to myself, and I was silently holding grudges against people who I thought had wronged me or done something to me. And then that would make me want to create distance and keep them away. This is one of those things that we don't like to hear. Just like you just said here, it's the ugly truth or a beautiful lie. When people are honest, it may hurt, but it actually helps. That's a beautiful way to actually put it. But when you have when you have the mindset that you can't be open and honest with someone, that's usually an indicator that you've had over and over with this person, that maybe it's been an interaction that every time you try to bring something to their attention, they always have a reason, they always have a justification, they always have an answer for whatever it is that you bring it to them. When you have someone in your life that you want to be close to, whether it's your significant other, your spouse, or family member, or friends, or even the coworkers, you want to have a better relationship. We all want to have better relationships, but it takes effort, it takes work, it takes you being able to step out and be honest with them and tell them when there are areas of their life that actually, that you see, that you recognize, that you have paid into when it comes to establishing a relationship, to bring honesty to them. You know, it's not something that, have you ever had a person that you want to bring something to their attention, but you haven't developed a relationship with them? Or we said it in one of our videos, you haven't made those emotional deposits in them, to where when you have to go and tell them something, it's making a proverbial withdrawal to bring something to them that they need to work on, or they need to actually have attention to get better at. You shouldn't necessarily always come to them with just the negative, hopefully you have a solution with the negative. Don't come to someone and tell them what's wrong without offering them a way to fix it, correct it, or even bring it to their attention and make a suggestion. Anybody can point out shortcomings and criticize and tell you what you need to do, but how many of us actually have solutions? That's something that we want to actually help you with when it comes to this. One of the solutions that you actually have to be able to do with someone who is actually walking in pride is be honest with them. That's the first, the H. Honesty will always be the best policy that you can ever bring to a friend that you love or someone that you care about when it comes to their relationship. Thanks, Rule. I appreciate you joining us. Why are women why women are good at manipulating at actions where men has to manipulate in words? That's pretty good. Honestly, I would probably say that's the reverse. I think women are very good when it comes to manipulation with the words because of just the dynamics in communication. Most women are very versatile when it comes to the word, where guys would be more action oriented, I would think. And I'm not saying you're wrong. I'm just saying that's how I would probably see it. Where, like I mentioned earlier in this live session, that I was more passive aggressive. I was more keeping things to myself, and I would act out versus communicate how I feel and what I thought. One thing that I shared in a video earlier was how Renee actually helped me actually put words to the feelings that I had to be able to communicate to her to overcome the obstacles that we had and the conflicts that we had. If you can't communicate effectively, which is how you feel, then how can somebody rightfully be able to help you come to a solution to those feelings? When you think I am in a position where we talked about first, arrogance, that there's nothing wrong, or even prideful, however you want to put it, where I didn't think I ever made a mistake in a relationship, then that was something that I was living in denial. So many times people can be in denial about how they are as individuals that it prevents them from even getting closer to someone that they may want to be in a relationship with long term. It's almost like you self-destructing. You're causing things, self-sabotage. You're causing things to happen that you may not even be aware of. It's only because you hadn't taken the time to do the inventory to say, am I struggling in these areas of greed, arrogance, or pride? Have I fallen into the gap? And hopefully you haven't fallen into the gap and struggling with all three at the same time. I think even looking back at my life at different stages in my life, I think I was at different areas, had more of it was bigger. So I think when I was younger, I was tend to be more greed oriented, where now let's just say in a natural sense, even though it's not always talking about money, where I get a little bit of money from a job that I have, now I'm able to buy things that I want, and I'm not thinking about others or even doing things that I want because I have the resources to do those things, and it's always about me versus what can I do to help somebody else in their life or what they're trying to accomplish with the resources that God has blessed me with. That's something that I think you would be in your earlier stages of your life. Let's just say between the ages of late teens and early 20s, we would probably be more greed and arrogance than I would say arrogant, meaning I'm good. That was a common phrase that I think I would use in situations that if even if Renee asked me what's wrong or how you feel or what's going on with you, I would say I'm good, nothing. Where internally I haven't really digested enough to even be able to articulate what it was that I was feeling and what I was going through to be able to take some assistance, because a person who is prideful or arrogant can't accept assistance, especially from their significant other or even their girlfriend or their wife, because they don't think they're supposed to have these struggles. Well, let me be the first to tell you, at the stage that I am in my life, you will come to recognize that pride will become so big that you think that I can't accept help or I won't accept help from others when they have nothing but your best interests at heart. When you have those stages in your life that you want to get better at, you have to exercise that level of humility to get better at areas where you have shortcomings in. If you don't, hopefully you have someone around you, even if it's not your significant other, if it's one of your brothers or somebody that you really trust that's a confidant, those are the people to actually come into your life, that have come into your life, that you can actually go to and say, what do you think? Do I really struggle in this area? Now, let me be the first to tell you, some people won't do that ever because they really don't want to know the truth. They really don't want to know areas that we're struggling in because they want to the position, they want the opportunity to stay right where they're at because they think I'm good, which goes back to pride. As you can see, it can be a vicious circle and you don't know why this is happening because these are areas that you have developed habits into. The way you actually break those habits is you have to do the opposite for a length of time to overcome areas that you're struggling with over and over again. Rule, thanks again for chiming in here. Women say communication is the key, but when they are angry, they gaslight and try to stop communicating what to do. I would agree that there are some people who actually will actually do that when it comes to the communication. They'll make you think that you're actually going crazy when you know what they said and what they done is contrary to what their actual action is. As we're talking about greed, arrogance, and pride, this is not confined only to men. This is confined to humans, the ladies included, because these are areas that we tend to fall back on, especially depending on your life experiences or challenges that have happened in your life, that have happened in your life, that you will make justification and reasons for why you are the way that you are. Am I greedy? Am I arrogant? Am I prideful? These are areas that we all are going to struggle with at different areas at different times, but it's always going to be a constant battle. But the battle comes, or the victory can come, is when you, one, lay it at the feet of the Lord who actually has overcome all of these things already, but you have a desire to get better and not be a slave to greed, arrogance, or pride in an area that is going to hinder the areas in your relationship and in your life that is bringing you discontentment, that is bringing you strife and turmoil and challenges, where you don't feel like you know what is it that I can do to get better at it, because the goal that you always want to get better at is the relationships that you have, because God will bring solutions, God will bring healing, God will bring choices to you if you are yielded to those who he has placed in your life. So what we talked about today is greed, arrogance, and pride. When we talk about falling into the gap, I wanted to actually come out and say this and talk about this because Renee brought it up when she was doing her live, that sometimes you have areas that come up in a conversation and it should be a trigger. It should be something that make you go, is that something that I'm struggling with? Is that something that is at the top of my list that I wasn't even aware of? Now, once you actually have an idea that is there, that you have been operating it, what can you do to actually overcome it? We talked about it from the greed standpoint, is generosity. If you find that you're withholding anything, tangible resources, emotional equity or emotional currency, generosity, giving of yourself and giving of yourself to others that have your best heart and your best interest at heart, can be a very good solution to how you can overcome it. Generosity. And for arrogance and pride, the superpower or the cure for that is humility. When you have the ability to say, you know what, I was wrong, I made a mistake. How come people have trouble owning when they have made mistakes or they're operating in an area that's not beneficial to anyone, but they still make justification or excuses or reasons for why that they are the way that they are? Unfortunately, this can be a hindrance, especially for the guys, because we think, especially as you get older, I don't have to change. I'm just the way that I am. I am the way that I am. You're not Popeye. You're actually a person that can change. When you change, things can get better. If you find that nothing is getting better, that's a simple indicator that you do need to change something. Maybe it's the arrogance, maybe it's the pride. That's something that you have to think about when it comes to your relationships. So, I hope you actually got something for this. Normally we go a little bit longer, but short and sweet. Greed, arrogance, and pride. How is it impacting your life and in your relationships when it comes to it? We appreciate you guys hanging out with us on the live sessions. We read the comments. We read all the stuff that you guys actually put in there. Renee reads a lot of it and she shares a lot of them with me. And sometimes you do these and you don't really get to see, and unless you're putting in like Rule, and I think the other one earlier was Pork Chop, that if you don't put comments in, you don't really know if your people are actually resonating or even hearing some of the things that you're talking about, that I felt that the Lord put on my heart to share with the guys today. That if you find benefit or you found something here or you got a comment that you want to add or anything like that, put it in the channel, put it in the comments. Rich Relationship Refuge, Gil and Renee will be back here next week. I don't know what we're going to talk about. I'm sure she'll tell me, but it's going to be beneficial to your relationships. Remember, you're stronger together. We'll see you next week. Bye.